Oh yeah, YouTubers, this is Andu, and I'm here with a special vintage review. This is the Nerf Arrowstorm. Now, this is considered by many a classic as far as Nerf blaster history goes. Most collections aren't considered complete until they have one of these. Now, I saw one of these with arrows for $7 at a thrift store. Didn't understand quite what it was, how valuable it was, and didn't have any money on me at the time. Went back for it later and it was gone. So I watched on eBay, saw one of these pop up for a price that I didn't think was too unreasonable and picked it up. Just because I've got some great ideas for this thing. So that'll be a different video in the future. A unique thing about this is the fact that when we use the term vintage in the Nerf community, normally we're just talking about old blaster lines that have been discontinued, things from our childhoods. So, 10 years, maybe minus 1 or 2 years, about 8, 9 years, 10 or more. That's what we consider vintage. Now, the actual definition of vintage is something that's 20 years or older, and this blaster is 20 years old. It is 2013, and I do believe that the Aerostorm was released in 1993, so this is a 20-year-old blaster, and that's kind of cool to think of all the history it has, and also the fact that at that point in time, Nerf blasters didn't seem to have a whole lot of functionality. This blaster has some pretty decent functionality to it, definitely some things that we would consider modern features. So the Aerostorm, as its name implies, is designed to throw a hail of arrows. This is one of the early blasters that actually came with Nerf arrows. I'm getting ahead of myself. It held arrows, 6 in total. It could also take a second type of ammunition, which we'll also get to a little bit later. And another interesting thing about it is the fact that it has no trigger. It has what I consider a primitive slam fire mechanism. As you pull back, you see the cylinder rotates, and as you pull it all the way back, it both primes and then releases the plunger, and it slams forward. I don't want to dry fire it, because I can't tell if this thing has an air restrictor or not. I actually can't. I'm guessing I might not. We'll see. But you can rotate the turret just by pulling it forward and back just a little bit. And let me tell you, this is a loud piece of equipment. Hope I don't disturb any of my neighbors here in the dorms. But instead of the modern slam fire mechanisms, which you pull it all the way back, it primes, and when you push the handle all the way forward, it would then release. This instead releases all the way at the back. So if you'll give me a second, I will grab an arrow, see which way, that's the direction the cylinder rotates. And this is an arrow from a Blazin Bow. I pull it back, rotates all the way back, and then it releases at the back. So now the blaster just kind of sits like that, and all you have to do is slide it forward and you're good to go again. Now, I wanted to test this out with vintage arrows because the old Nerf arrows were a little different. Couldn't get a hold of any. So what I did was I went out and bought a 6-pack of Aerozone foam arrows. Now, this is a Nerf arrow from the Blazin Bow. They are very similar. The Nerf arrow is a little longer, and the inner diameter is a little bigger on the Blazin Bow arrows. Also, they both have twisted fletching, so they actually cause the arrow to spin through the air. The thing is, Nerf arrows are incredibly valuable right now. They're a quirky ammunition that a lot of people like, don't use in wars very often, but people like them. And they used to release packs of 3 arrows for the Big Bad Bow. They don't have those for sale anymore. I hope they bring them back now that they've released the Blazin Bow. But even going on eBay, Nerf arrows go for a lot of money. The vintage arrows were an extra 2 inches longer or so, and I wanted to test this blaster with those, but I just couldn't afford them. So I went and bought the Aerozone arrows because those are still available, and I did my research. Always do your research, and found out that yes, these will work with the Aerostorm. However, they are a tight fit. You really have to force them on there. So, and I just happened to get lucky. Just yesterday, my fiance picked up a Blazin Bow so I could do the project, and now I have actual Nerf arrows. So I'm going to cut the video, load up the Aerostorm with my Aerozone arrows so you can get an idea of what this blaster is supposed to look like. So here it is in all its glory. I've loaded up my 6 Aerozone arrows onto the Aerostorm. This definitely looks like, I don't know if it looks awesome or weird. I think a little bit of both. I don't know how afraid people are of arrows in modern Nerf wars, but it's certainly a lot of big ammunition in one place. So these arrows do have to be forced on here a little bit, but I was able to do it. And I've never actually slam fired off all the shots on this thing. So I'm going to rotate the camera. We can take a look here. And I'll adjust the angle. Alright, there we go. Slam firing Aerostorm. 6 Aerozone arrows in 3, 2, 1. Wow, that's loud. So those shots kind of went all over the place. I'm going to go retrieve them and move on to the next segment. So the next thing about this blaster, something that was advertised for, is the ability that it could fire 2 different kinds of ammunition. The second type of ammunition is vintage mega darts. Now these are nothing like the new red megas. They're smaller, definitely different materials, but this was the predecessor to the micro dart. I've seen them in Whistler form, which I'd like to have some, but they are much rarer than these suction cups, and these are rare enough as it is, and I picked up a couple of packs essentially for the purpose of, well, 1, having them, and 2, to be able to test vintage blasters. And so it's a tight fit, but the arrows fit over the outside of the barrels, but the megas fit on the inside. Now, this is a tight fit, definitely, and about this point it gets really hard to push in any further from the front. And I don't want to crumple my darts, so the way you want to load these is by twist fitting. Now, as you twist the dart, because of the friction, the dart actually twists kind of in a spiral, and so the head and the tail don't line up anymore, like this. And that actually causes the dart to get smaller, it constricts a bit. And so, twist fit. I am being gentle on these because I want these to last me a good long while. They're already old. And I'll finish twist fitting this one here. And these are the ammunition that this blaster actually fires at great distances, because they are much smaller than the arrows, and they have an amazing spring or seal because it's such a tight fit. In fact, if this blaster had any less punch, these would not be able to fire at all. Now, this entire length is a plunger tube, and I haven't taken it apart to get a look at it myself, but I've seen pictures, and it does have a very powerful spring. So I'll cycle it a little bit. All right, shoot, go around again. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera this way, and we'll do some firing with these. And adjust the angle a bit. Now, I've gotten flack for having sun coming in the window at the end of the hallways during these videos. That's just the natural lighting, and I really can't do much about that. But test firing 3 vintage mega suction darts. 3, 2, 1. All right, and those shots were flat, and I can definitely tell that my the range with my vintage mega darts and this blaster was about on par with the elite sidearms, at least the smaller ones like the Fire Strike, the Triad, also the Hammer Shot, the Rebel, Sweet Revenge pistols. Full-size elite blasters like the Alpha Trooper, the Retaliator, and the Rampage get 5-10 feet more range than the sidearms. This was firing those old, big, incredibly unaerodynamic darts just as far as the pistols. So I am very pleased with that, and this definitely has a lot of power potential. I'm going to move on to the next segment now, which is going to be a comparison between this and the new, I might as well just pick it up, and the new Blazin Bow. I posted a review of this just last night, and I noticed a couple of things that I'd like to show you guys. Alright, now I told you I'm going to be doing a comparison. It's not so much the external features as the performance that I'm interested in. This is, of course, the vintage Aerostorm, and by vintage I mean that this is 20 years old. This is the definition of vintage, and it actually has some incredibly modern features to it, so that's cool. And then we've got the brand new Blazin Bow that just came out in, the last, definitely in the last year. I'm thinking in the last few months. I don't recall exactly, but these are both designed to fire Nerf arrows, which have changed very little in the last 20 years. They have the same outer diameters, or incredibly close, and I want to see what the performance difference of these is. Now, for starters, what I'd like to show you is the fact that it is a tight fit, but these air zone arrows will slide onto the Aerostorm, and they fire. Alright, however, I don't want to set any of these down because I really hate to duck out a frame. That just seems incredibly unprofessional and unclean to me. I can slide the air zone arrows about the same distance onto the Blazin Bow. Full draw, and it won't even launch them. So that immediately tells me that this has much better airflow and a lot more power overall than this does. And comparing the springs, I can also tell that. Now I'm going to turn the camera back this way. I'm going to do a brief range test between the two. I'm going to do level shots with new Nerf arrows. Nerf arrow on the Aerostorm, flat from the hip in 3, 2, 1. Alright, I'm sorry if you're not able to really see the arrows, but I will walk down there to show you where they landed. Now I've got Blazin Bow, new Nerf arrow from the hip in 3, 2, 1. And let's go take a look. Pick up the camera and bipod all together and trip over my blaster. That was good. This is from the Blazin Bow, and this is from the Aerostorm. Now the Blazin Bow shot did wind off to the side, hit this frame, and fall down, but I could definitely tell that the Aerostorm has a lot more in the way of overall airflow, pressure, power in general. So definitely point to the Aerostorm there. The last thing I'd like to show you as far as the power of the Aerostorm is that you'll notice this modern Elite Dart has a terrible fit. It can wobble around, all sorts of stuff like that. But I'm going to slide that back in there, try to keep the shot in frame. It doesn't launch the dart well, but it will launch a dart with almost no barrel fit at all. So this thing packs one heck of a wallop. Also, I'd like to show I have some more micro darts here. One's a suction, one's a whistler. And these have these slightly wider rubber heads on them, and those actually create a halfway decent CL here. So I put that in. I'm going to fire them at this wall here. First is the whistler, and then the suction. And that actually stuck to the wall even though it hit it at an angle. So this will actually fire most micro darts except for streamlines, which it will fire, but not very well. A couple of other things I want to talk about in this review before I run out of battery, which is probably going to be pretty darn soon. This blaster came to me in used condition. All the screws they don't look like this was ever taken apart, so I don't think this was ever modified or tinkered with. All the screws look great. They aren't even rusting. I have the original stickers. They're not in great shape, but they're in very, very good shape. Definitely lightly used, or slightly used, a little faded with time. I even have one of the previous owners, probably a little kid at the time, his name written in here in Sharpie, which is kind of neat. Shows a little history and character. There's definitely some dust and some aging showing on this thing, and some stress marks at key points of the blaster. I don't know that you'll be able to see that, but where stress was exerted, as I understand it, this was an earlier type of plastic than the modern ABS most blasters use nowadays, and so it creaks a bit more and stresses a bit more. So there is that. Now the last thing I'd like to show you is something that I just discovered moments before making this video. It's generally considered to be very difficult to get any form of accuracy out of this blaster because you've got a lot of resistance as you pull back this way and you're holding it forward. It wants to move around, all sorts of things, especially if you're firing at a high rate. What I've discovered, well, okay, a stock might fit on here if I custom fit it, but it's much easier to aim if instead of pulling the back handle back, if you push forward with your arm. So I'll demonstrate that. So you're using your backhand as the anchor, and you just push this handle forward straight towards your opponent, and you're trying to point with that forward arm. It's much easier to maintain some form of accuracy. So that is my review and comparison of the vintage, truly vintage Nerf Arrowstorm and its comparison to the very new Blazin Bow. A cool blaster. I'm glad I have it in my collection, and I'm really looking forward to the mods I have planned for this. I don't know when that'll happen, but I've taken the things I've seen other people do and taken it a step further, which actually is the biggest reason that I picked this up. So thank you very much for watching, and keep your stick on the ice.